Welcome everyone. We have seen decision making statements. Let's continue with the looping statements in Java. So in programming languages, loops are used to execute a set of instruction or functions repeatedly when some condition become true. Okay. So looping in programming languages is a feature which facilitates the execution of a set of instructions or functions repeatedly. So if I want a set of code to be executed for a fixed iteration or a non-fixed iteration, I will be going for the looping statements. So Java provides three ways for executing the loops. All these ways provide a similar basic functionality, but they differ in syntax and condition checking time. So the three loops will provide the basic functionality, which is the iteration functionality, but they differ in the syntax and the condition checking time. Okay, there are three types: for loop, while loop, and do while loop. So for loop. So for loop is a control flow statement that iterates a part of the program multiple times. So this is a basic functionality for the loops, to iterate a part of the program multiple times. So for loop also does the same, and the difference is if the number of iteration is fixed, like how many times I want to execute that part of a program is fixed, means I will be using for loop. And the syntax is for int, init, which is initialization, then condition, and we have increment and decrement operator. Open curly braces, then we have a set of a block of code here which to be executed. So there are three types of for loops in Java. One is simple for loop, which is a basic one, and another one is for each or enhanced for loop. The third one is labeled for loop. So this is the flow of for loop. So we have initialization, then condition, then the statement to be executed. After that, increment or decrement. So initialization, here we initialize the value or the variable in use. So it marks the start of a for loop. So you can declare a variable outside the loop also, or else you can declare inside the loop. So an already declared variable can be used, or a variable can be declared local to loop only. Then we have condition. So it is used for testing the exit condition for a loop. This will give a boolean value as a return. It is also an entry control loop, as the condition is checked prior to the execution of the loop statement. So the condition is to be checked before executing the statement. If it returns a positive boolean value, then the statement will get executed. If the boolean value is negative, then it will not execute the block of statements. So the next is statements. Once the condition is evaluated to true, the statements in the loop body are executed. After that we have increment and decrement. So it is used for updating the variable for next iteration. Finally, loop gets terminated when the condition becomes false. So the loop termination marking the end of its life cycle. So this is a flow of a simple or the basic for loop. Let's see with an example. So here I want to print the value of I from 1 to 10. So for that I am declaring a variable locally only for the for loop. So int data type and a variable name I and initializing the variable with the value 1. Then the next one is condition. So I less than or equal to 10. After that a post increment of I, then a open curly braces, then the statement to be executed, which is system.out.println of I. So I want to print the I values. Okay. So if I run this, I will get 1 to 10 values. So that's how a simple for loop works. The next one is nested for loop. So Java nested for loop means like nested if and nested switch statements. In the same way, we also have a nested for loop. So if we have a for loop inside another for loop, it is known to be nested for loop. So the inner for loop executes completely whenever outer loop executes. So I will give an example with that for the nested for loop. So these nested for loops can be used for matrix calculations like that. Let's reduce the iteration value to 3. This is outer for loop. Let's give it for inner for loop. The same value of the I. I want to print both the values here. I plus then the space between them is of j. So that's how we can print the variable values. Okay. Now let's check whether everything is closed. So closed, 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 and closed. So for the first I equal to 1, I less than or equal to 3, then I plus plus. After this, the condition is true, so it will go inside the loop. So inside we have another for loop. So it will check the condition that is true. So it will print I as 1, then j as 1. Now instead of going for the outer loop, it will continue with the inner loop with the same value of I. So this time j gets incremented to 2. So j less than or equal to 3, which is 2 less than or equal to 3, that is true. So I is 1 and j becomes 2, it will be printed. So j now becomes 3, j less than or equal to 3, which is true, and that's also printed, which is 1, 3. Now j gets incremented to 4. So 4 less than or equal to 3, that is false. So now the inner loop gets stopped and it will move on to the outer loop. So I becomes 2. Okay, I becomes 2, the condition is true, so it will go inside the loop. So j remains with 1 again because the loop already got terminated before. Now it will restart it. So that's how the nested for loop gets executed. So 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. After the inner loop gets terminated, the outer loop gets executed. So that's how the nested for loop will get executed. The next type of for loop is enhanced or for loop each. So this type of for loop is used to traverse array or collections in Java. So this type of for loop is used for Java variables, I mean array variables and collections in Java. And it is easier to use than simple for loop because we don't need to increment value and use subscript notations. It works on element basis, not index. So usually we will be using the index values. But enhanced for loop will be using the elements basis only. And it returns element one by one in the defined variables. And this enhanced for loop is inflexible and should be used only when there is need to iterate through the elements in sequential manner without knowing the index of currently processed element. So the syntax is type for type var colon array. I will just give an example with an array variable. So the array variable is This is how you can initialize an array variable. Array comes under different or a set. Array comes under a separate topic, so I will explain about how to declare or use array later. Okay. So for enhanced for loop, the syntax is for, then a variable with the data type, then the array. So then I will be printing the values in the array using this. So what it does is, it will copy all the values from the variable ARR to the I variable. So I am printing the I values. So 12, 23, 44, 5, 6 and 7, 8. So this is the for loop enhanced. The next one is Java labeled for loop. So we can have a name for each Java for loop. To do so, we used label before the for loop. So it is useful if we have nested for loop so that we can break or continue specific for loop. So usually break and continue keywords breaks or continues the innermost of for loop only. Okay. So it break and continue on reserved keywords which can be used in looping or switch statements. So the syntax is label name colon and the for loop followed by it. I will give you the example. So the syntax is, I have to first label something, then a colon, a for loop followed by it. Inside this, I'm going to use another for loop. I want to label that also. So this is a nested for loop. We're using the break. I'm getting out of the inner for loop. So I'm using the label of the outer for loop in order to break out it. So that's the use of labeled for loop. You can also print a statement infinite times using the infinite for loop. So the syntax is for stem dot out dot print ln. Let's print something infinite. Print for infinite times. So that's how we can print a statement infinite times using for loop. You can also print patterns using the for loop. So I will show you how to print some patterns here. Let's go with a simple one. This we will be using nested for loop here. So here I am getting the stars, but I want to be printed in the same line. So for that, just use print here. So this is how the pattern is printed. So for that, I am using an outer loop with I equal to 1 and I less than or equal to 5. So for the first row, I have only one column here. So I means number of rows and J means number of columns here. Okay. So 5 rows I am gonna print. So in the first row I want only one star. So for that I am using J equal to 1. Okay, the first column after printing the first column, I want this statement to be terminated. I mean the loop has to be terminated. So for that I'm using, instead of using the number of columns I'm going to print, I'm using the I variable here, so that it gets terminated after printing the first column. So 1 less than or equal to 1, it is true, the star gets printed. After that j becomes true, the condition becomes false, it goes out of the loop. So after going out of the loop, we have another statement, system.out.print, and with a empty brackets, which means it will go to the new line, because I want to print the next row here in the new line. That's why I'm using this particular line here. So that's how a pattern is printed. You can also print the reverse shape or the patterns design here. We're just slightly changing this. So I want the last row in the first. So at first I want to print 5 columns. So there has to be 5. So it has to be then j minus minus. So this is how we can print that pattern upside down. Make it all the stars here. We can also print number patterns. So for that I need a variable num, then going to the for loop. So int I equal to 0. So I is then, let's go up to 7. I plus plus. So assigning the values for the variable num. After that another for loop, another variable. So j less than or equal to I. Now I want to print only one column here. System dot out dot print ln. I want to print the number. Okay. After printing, I want to increment that. So for the next row, I want to print that thing in the new line. For that, I should print ln. This has to be print. So let's give a try. So that's how a number pattern is printed. We can also use for loop for Fibonacci series. So the logic behind Fibonacci series is you want to add up the values of the first two, which is 0 and 1. Then the next value will be the addition of first two, which is 1. The fourth will be the addition of second and third, which is 2. Like that, the Fibonacci series will be printed. So for that we can use for loop. So for the first two values 0 and 1, I want to declare the variables. So using the data type int, I'm using the first value and two values. Okay, this is for the third value variable. Then I want to set a count, like how many numbers should be printed. Now a for loop int I equal to 2, because 0 and 1 is already declared. So using 2 here, less than or equal to count, which is the number of iteration that has to go on. Then I increment so the logic is has to add the first two inputs. So n3 should have the value of n1 and n2. System dot print ln n3. So after getting n3, now I want to add n2 and n3 to get the n4. So for that I will just change the values of n1 and n2. So n1 will be changed to n2, then n3 on n2 will be changing to n3. Now before getting into the loop, let's just print the value of n1 and n2 also. n1, n2. So let's give that try. So here we go. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. So that's how a Fibonacci series is printed using the for loop. These are the use of for looping statements. We can print different patterns. We can also perform some operations which depends upon the logics. And the remaining two loops, which is while loop and do while loop, I will explain you in the next session.